Hey, yes, snacks, welcome back. My name's Jack. Now, this is actually Jack from the editing room speaking right now. Today's main big story began over 2 years ago, but just now got an update this month. An incredibly skillful display of someone's act of revenge. But okay, so in it, you meet someone named Shorty, the person who kinda gets their life absolutely ruined by OP. But listening back to it now, there's something I want you to help me figure out. As you read or listen, take note of the amount of times you feel Shorty deserves this treatment from OP. So this all began 2 years ago in r/pro revenge with the title Hell Hath No Fury Like Me Scorned. This story starts 31 years ago, but the revenge part was pure serendipity that began 2 years ago. I'm going to shorten some or most parts because it's a crazy ride, but I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all have. I learned a hell of a lot on this journey, and part of the reason for this write-up is to share that with others. The beginning. In 1990, when I was just out of middle school and my sister was still in elementary, my dad met his third wife at the only gas station in our town. They soon moved in together, and my dad abandoned us in our basement apartment to live on a shanty houseboat that didn't run to live with her. He would show up every other week and give me $40 for our groceries. Eventually, someone figured out the situation and called my mom. We went to live with her, which was, believe it or not, worse. My dad and his shanty wife got married in 1991. Not long after, she called me and told me my dad's brain tumor had returned. It hadn't, and that he couldn't handle the stress of being around us. That the only people he could bear to be around was her and her son, Shorty, who was my age. When I called my dad to ask if this was true, he said it wasn't, and he just couldn't believe that she would say that to begin with. That was one of our last conversations until 2 years ago. So the middle. There's not much in this part. I worked my way through college, living in my car from time to time. My dad and I were no contact, but I heard from family that he'd bought a house and put his son through some vocational classes. When my grandmother died, Shorty and Shanty wife showed up in a truck and took all the furniture and anything else that wasn't tied down or already gone. Eventually, I went no contact with my dad's side of the family. I struggled for years, decades really, but I made it. And I have a great job and a good family now. The best revenge is living well, right? The pre-end warm-up. So 2 years ago, October 2019, I got a call from my dad's brother, Alan. He told me my dad was in a nursing home in another state. Great! And I needed to go see him because he needed my help. What? Shorty had ghosted him. The nursing home, coincidentally, was about 20 minutes from my house, and I saw an opportunity, and I went. The reunion was underwhelming. I didn't want to make amends, but I did want to hear how he wound up dumped and all alone in another state. And it was a really, really good story. Shanty wife got lung cancer and put my dad in a nursing home before she died in 2017. She suffered, and I was happy to hear it, but I was sad it wasn't butt cancer. Shorty became his power of attorney when she died, and had been visiting my dad, living in my dad's house with his 2 children, and taking care of my dad's affairs since his mom died. But now, he was missing in action, and my dad was worried about him. He asked me to drive the hour and a half to his house to check on everything. That's all he wanted. He never even asked me how I had been. I agreed to go. I think out of morbid curiosity. I'd never even been to my dad's house. I did want to see where he lived with his real family for 30 years. I wanted to see what could have been my life. It was 50 shades of freaking awful. The grass hadn't been cut all summer. You couldn't get to the front door for the overgrowth. There were 3 pickup trucks in the yard. 2 were full of trash. Cabs and beds and backseats, just trash. Mail, clothes, paper, shoes, garbage bags. I couldn't understand it. My dad's handicapped modified SUV was on 4 flats and full of garbage too. I didn't have a key, so I just walked around. From what windows I could look through, the inside was in shambles and hoarded to hell. On the front and carport doors were dozens of notices from the city that they were going to condemn the place. The carport was also hoarded. boxes and boxes stacked on each other, most rotting from the rain. The yard was full of garbage, broken Christmas ornaments, more shoes, rusted tools, old toys. There was a letter in the mailbox notifying him that since the house was abandoned, mail would not be delivered anymore. That night, I googled powers of attorney and how to use them. So then I went back the next day and showed my bedbound dad the pictures on my phone. He vowed to beat Shorty's ass, then asked me to help more. I told him I would, but he'd have to sign power of attorney over to me. All of it. Durable, financial, and medical. If he didn't, he could figure this all out by himself. He agreed, so I set about finding a lawyer who could get or would drive to another state and do the paperwork in the nursing home. Bless that lawyer for being so good at his job, because all I did was tell him what I knew, and he put together a beautifully bulletproof POA. It was full of stuff I didn't even know I would need. He also filled the paperwork to revoke Shorty's POA. And now I'm unstoppable. So note, we're from a small rural town, and it's the kind of creepy, landlocked place that no matter how long you've been gone or how far away you've been, when you go back, you'll see someone you know. Even if you don't know, you know them. It's like playing 7 Degrees of everybody all the time. It's suffocating, but it can also be helpful. The beginning of the end. I got to work the next morning. I didn't know how scorched the earth would be when I finished, and I didn't want Shorty or anyone from his prolific inbred family trying to find me, so I made sure nothing I did had my name on it. I opened a Google account for my dad and got a Google number. I opened a P.O. box for him in his town. I put in a mail forwarding notice. I pulled his credit report. I took the POA to my dad's small town bank, changed the address on his accounts, and got new account numbers. I requested copies of every transaction back to the day Shanty Wife had died, about 13 months worth. I had to go to the main branch, 2 hours from my house, the next day to pick the records up. I sat in the lobby all afternoon, going through the account. I cornered a service rep and got a crash course in his debits and deposits. This is when I figured out the extent of Shorty's staggering stupidity. My dad got about $5,000 a month in disability and Social Security every month. Twice a week, Shorty was going into a branch and withdrawing cash, all of the cash, for 13 months. And every time he did, as the POA, he had to sign a form stating that he was acting on behalf of my dad. And that form was notarized by the bank. I went through every withdrawal and got the bank to confirm that every one of them was made by Shorty. Hello, Editor Jack popping in again. Just another point to consider again as I'm listening back to this entire story. I can't help but theorize, based on the dad already being terrible as a father towards OP, that maybe he was no better in his treatment towards Shorty. In which case, I wonder if maybe the reason Shorty's been recklessly stealing dad's money like this is, well, because he's kind of in the same mindset as OP. Though that said, it might not excuse the rest of the information you're about to find out, especially about the dog. Then I went to the house and called a locksmith. I knew it was bad, but I had no idea what was waiting for me there. He got the first door open, and the stench rolled out like a fog bank. We both gagged. 2 locks later, I was so embarrassed by what he had to see and smell, I gave him a $60 tip. And with shiny new keys in hand, I called the cops. I told them I was the power of attorney for my dad, I was checking on his house, and there were 3 vehicles there that didn't belong to him. He asked me if I knew who they belonged to. I said no, and I wanted them towed. He told me to call a tow company, and he would meet them there. They showed up with 2 wreckers. The tow truck guy got out and asked for a signature. I only signed my first name. As I was signing, he asked, "Do you know Shorty?" Running on pure hatred at this point, I surprised myself. "Do you?" I asked. He said he did, and that he's an a-hole. I responded, "Oh, he might be. Hey, can you do me a favor? If you see him, will you tell him my name is coming for him?" His bravado evaporated. He knows a crazy bitch when he sees one, apparently. They towed the trucks. When everyone was gone, I opened the door in the carport to peek in. The sun was going down and it was dark in the house. I heard something faint, and after some seconds, realized it was the roaches and rats doing their roach and rat stuff. I could smell it all in my hair. I sat on the carport steps and watched the sun go down. I was mad. Just so freaking cosmically livid that 72 hours was all it took to dissolve 3 decades. And here I was, stinking and listening to the rats and cleaning everyone else's stuff up, taking time away from my family. And for what? I had a coming to Jesus with myself. I could either bow out now, double down. And the thing is, I'm tenacious. To a goddamn fault. I had to be to survive. And this was a bone I couldn't put down. The thought of Shorty's life being upended, his only source of income probably disappearing literally overnight, and my dad having to hear secondhand from me that he's broke and alone made me absolutely giddy. I desperately wanted them both to lose what they had left, so I decided I was going to triple dog down. That night, I Googled restraining orders. Turned out it's surprisingly easy to get one. I went to the courthouse in my hometown, went to the clerk's office, and told her I needed a restraining order. I filled the form in a rickety little table while I was there. I wasn't prepared to see a judge that day, but she took the form from me and said, "Okay, I'll see if the judge is still here." That kind of scared me. She took me to his chambers, and as I was waiting, I looked around and saw he had certificates of appreciation hanging up from various veterans groups. Then I wiped my palms and thought, fish in a fricking barrel. He asked about my dad's stint in the Marines and about the DoD office logo on my sweater. I'm a contractor. He read my form and granted the temporary order. I would have to go back for the permanent one, where Shorty would be able to argue against it. But then I went home and Googled biohazard companies and elder abuse statutes in my state. I hired a biohazard company to shovel all the crap out of the house for $7,000. I would have paid double. They found my dad's mummified dog under some pizza boxes in the master bedroom. They sent me pictures and salvaged some papers. Shorty was served during this time, and a hearing was set. I got to work collecting and documenting stuff. I made pictures and spreadsheets and timelines with cross-references because, screw it, now they had my full attention. The paid versions of Truthfinder and Trello seriously got me through all this. In my spare time, I went to the nursing home and gave my dad 8x10 copies of the pictures of his dead dog from every angle. Jesus Christ! Before court, I went to the police station nearby and told them I wanted to report an elder abuse crime. A white-collar detective came out and told me it was a domestic matter and that since Shorty had been power of attorney, everything he had done was legal. And this was the day I got to teach a small-town detective about the fiduciary responsibilities of a POA. Thanks, Google! I handed him a copy of the statute with the applicable sections highlighted. Then I handed him a thick folder with bank statements, pictures of the hoarded house and dead dog, a copy of my dad's credit report that showed he was tens and tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and a spreadsheet listing every cash withdrawal with a running total of the stolen amounts. The grand total was just over $130,000 in cash. That's not including the lost value of the house or the credit cards he opened and used. I told him he could keep that folder since it wasn't the only one I had. Then I told him I would wait for a case number, and I sat down. He came back in about 30 minutes and apologized, said I had a case, and gave me a case number. Then I headed over to the courthouse. And now this is the end. There were other people there, and I had to wait my turn. And while I was waiting, that stupid mother flipper schlepped his sloppy butt into the courtroom by himself and obviously, literally, non-metaphorically, dirty. His shoes were untied and that turned my giggle box over. Then it was our turn and we stood up. The same judge as before asked me some questions, asked him some questions, and asked me if I had any proof. I had a very thick folder of it. The judge asked me if I had gone to the police. Well, yes, sir, I have. Do you have a case number? As a matter of fact, I do. The order was granted, permanently and for life, but not before the judge halted proceedings and told Shorty he needed a lawyer. Now, someone told me that the courthouse would have a copy of my dad's discharge papers, so while I was there, I got a copy of those, because why not? I also used my POA to take Shanty Wife off the deed to the house. That way, if my dad died and it went into probate, Shorty had no immediate claim. I also went and got copies of my dad's birth certificate and shanty wife's death certificate. Technically, stepchildren can't request that info, but the clerk who waited on me recognized my dad's name and told me she lost her virginity to my Uncle Alan in the 60s and went to my grandparents' funeral. So, I got all the forms I wanted. Yeah, that has got to be the weirdest way to say you're related to someone in some form. Oh, hey, OP! I banged your uncle. Did you know that? Shanty wife left my dad $50K in life insurance. About $35K of that was left since Shorty was spending my dad's money and not his mom's. So, I opened an Ally account and transferred every penny over. Then, I set up recurring transfers for the monthly deposits. At any given time, there was no more than $100 in his account. I also found a house flipper that paid me enough for the house to pay off his mortgage. That's the thing about probate. There's nothing to fight over if there's nothing there. And I made sure there was freaking nothing there. My dad died thinking he still owned a house. Speaking of which, this is about the time I found my dad's life insurance policies. They were up to date, and Shanty wife was the beneficiary. My power of attorney didn't allow me to change beneficiaries, but allowed me to assign them. And since Shanty wife was dead, there was technically none. This is where the death certificates came in handy. I assigned my sister and me as the beneficiaries. Irrevocable too, which means that the only way to change that is for my dad and me and my sister to agree to it. I kept my dad in the dark about all of this. The only thing he ever really knew about was the restraining order and his dead dog. I found out that he had purchased the gravesite next to Shanty wife and wanted to be buried next to her. That was just never going to frickin' happen. I googled national cemeteries and found out he qualified to be in one since he was a disabled Vietnam-era veteran. So I arranged for that instead. Now I know you might want to feel conflicted about supporting the OP at this point, but let's remind ourselves. This man abandoned 2 daughters to a basement dwelling so that he could chase another woman on a boat. His only way of keeping in touch with them, his only effort, was giving them a weekly allowance. I'm gonna be honest, I fully support the OP's actions here. So, all the cherries on top, my dad died in June this year, and I was there. He's buried in a national cemetery far away where no one will ever go visit him. The only obituary I ran was on the funeral home's website, and that only for insurance purposes. I wrote it as vague as possible. There was no service. His urn was purple, the color he hated most. I got a call in August from the prosecutor's office in my hometown. The lady on the other end is married to my first cousin because, of course she is. That's how it frickin' works there. Shorty was arrested just after midnight on July 1st, was still in jail, and had been arraigned on felony elder abuse charges. He's facing 10 years in prison. She told me not to expect the trial anytime soon, as it can take up to 3 years for that to happen. I told her that was awesome, since the uncertainty will hopefully haunt him. And after all that, he's still got prison to look forward to. He lost his kids, he lost his dad, I'm spending his mom's cancer money, he lost his free house and trucks, he has no credit and will never be able to get any sort of decent job and will, hopefully for a long time, not be able to find a decent place to live. And I sleep like a freaking baby. And it was at this point OP decided to include a bunch of photos of the whole experience, including Shorty himself's mugshot, with a lot of the personal details removed for the sake of privacy, of course. Got to at least give them that. But wow, just looking at the state of the place. This was the r/pro-revenge subreddit, but it looks more like bad roommates. I mean, the more you look into these photos, the more I feel a bit conflicted, actually, with how OP absolutely ruins Shorty's life here. I mean, to be fair, it wasn't him who, ditched OP and, left her to fend for herself as a young woman. But at the same time, man literally abandoned a house and abandoned care for who was essentially his father, would continue to steal from him for, a year on end. Oh, but hey, he's got a sick drum set, though. Where do you stand on this? Do you think Shorty has gotten what he deserved, or do you think OP is kind of scorched earth on maybe the wrong person? On another note, OP and the sister actually spent 10 hours trying to take all this stuff out onto the street, obviously to get it all cleaned up. Within the next day, it had started looking like this, because neighbors had just trashed through it all like a bunch of raccoons. Seriously, what? The fact that it rained too? I mean, come on, surely if you see a pile of damaged and dirty old things like this, you're not going to be like, hey, I bet those bin bags have some really great quality stuff. I mean, Jesus, how bad is the cost of living crisis over there? So at the time, people found this to be a very satisfying read, but it doesn't actually end there. Because recently, we got an update. Part 2, Felony Boogaloo. Offering a quick recap for those who haven't heard this since 2 years ago. So in the meantime, I've monitored Shorty's online activities. When he moved out of state, I called the court and let them know just in case it violated his bail. When he got a job as a truck driver, I called the court to let them know he was repeatedly leaving his home state just in case it violated his bail. Then, 6 months ago, I got a call from the same victim's advocate. The trial was going to be set soon, and the court wanted input from the family regarding possible plea deals and sentencing. He was indicted on felony elder abuse and was facing 15 years in prison. The advocate let me know that the family could request prison time or plea him down to work release with restitution. The upside to prison was obvious, but the downside would be that we would not likely receive resolution or restitution since he'd perpetually be poor and in prison. With work release, he would receive restitution, but he would have his freedom. Somewhat. She wanted to know which we preferred. I asked for the night to think it over. Shorty's future rested in my hands, and I wanted to savor it. What kind of god did I want to be? To decide, I needed to do some math. If he went to prison for 15 years, he would be out in half or less. 7 years is a long time, but the restitution would surely take as long, if not longer, and I would get the pleasure of taking his money every month for years and years and years. I liked the thought of him working every day, toiling away in terrible conditions for terrible pay, and him knowing that a portion of that terrible day would be for nothing. I loved the thought that I would be the reason for it. So I called her back and told her we would be okay with a plea deal to felony, supervised release, and restitution. I didn't hear anything further until last week when the advocate called me again to let me know he'd accepted a deal. So what's the deal? He pled guilty to felony elder exploitation, first degree. We received 15 years, split and suspended, which means he won't serve any jail time. 2 years will be on felony work supervision, where he'll have to call in to his parole officer every day and be drug tested almost as frequently. After that, he'll be on regular probation for up to 5 years. The judge will schedule check-ins with him to ensure he's paying restitution and meeting the requirements of his work release and parole. The restitution, he has to pay back $130,000. He was ordered to pay $300 a month beginning on the 1st of January 2024. My math gamble paid off. It will take him 36 years to pay that back at $300 a month. If he misses a payment, he will go to jail. I will be in his life for decades, taking back from him bit by bit what he stole. So I think that's going to be it. I've done everything I can do, apart from being there to catch him if he violates the term of his release. Thank you for reading this tangled web of revenge. I hope it warms your heart for the holidays. So I'm not alone with this thought, but looking at the guy's mugshot, yeah, I don't think you're gonna get 36 years out of him. If lucky, maybe 2 decades. So what's your thoughts now with this update into consideration? You're still fully in support of OP? Do you think maybe they've taken things a bit too far and need to learn to move on? Some people absolutely egg OP on instead. Could you put 36 purple flowers next to the purple urn and remove one each year? Maybe adding flowers would be more dramatic? OP says, I freaking love this idea! Recommended music while visiting the grave. In the Deep Purple Falls, Purple Rain, or anything by Deep Purple. And of course, wear your Ravens team jersey. So end of the day, if you are visiting a cemetery at some point and you suddenly see someone skipping along with a bunch of purple flowers and some loud Purple Rain or Deep Purple music playing, just don't cross that person. Don't. Since we're in the subreddit, let's stick to another story about scummy thieving people. Operation Let It Go. So my dad just shared a story about my late Uncle Dale, his lifelong friend and fellow engineer. So in his memory and in spirit of the upcoming holidays, I present for you the tale of nepotism, engineering students, and Adina Menzel. So Uncle Dale was a senior engineer at a small firm in the Midwestern USA and engineering instructor at the local community college. He was also, unofficially, in charge of the office parties. To help offset the costs, he had a small tin box on a table outside of his office with a slot in it so that anyone could donate money to the party fund. Everyone knew about it and were happy to donate. A month or so before the company's big Christmas party, Uncle Dale decided to check the box. Lo and behold, it was empty. Uncle Dale knew something was wrong because he had seen several colleagues putting money in the box. This could only mean one thing. Someone was stealing from the party fund. At this moment, Brad, the owner's nephew and a fellow engineer, came around the corner, and something about the way Brad was looking at him made Uncle Dale suspicious. Now, Brad didn't have a good reputation around the office, to say the least. He had a reputation of being pushy, obnoxious, rude, and just plain entitled. Unfortunately, he was not only the owner's beloved nephew, but knew how to skirt the rules so he wouldn't get fired. So Uncle Dale decided to set a trap to catch the thief. Using his engineering skills, he set up a hidden rig using a hidden doorbell camera right by the box. He then had a colleague loudly brag about how he contributed $100 to the party fund. Then he waited. He got a notification that the camera was recording and watched Brad open the empty box, scowl in disgust, and throw the box against the wall. Now, you'd think this would be the end, with Uncle Dale presenting the video evidence to his boss to get Brad fired, but oh no. As I mentioned in a previous post, if there's one thing engineers love, it's solving problems. And if it's engineering students, they'll make it an experience to remember. Uncle Dale then went to his engineering students. He offered them extra credit to come up with a rigged box that would make noise when opened. The more obnoxious the sound, the higher the bonus. 1 week later, they delivered their project and demonstrated how it worked. Pleased with the results, Uncle Dale awarded them the extra credit as promised. Now, the next day, he set up the rigged box and proclaimed, "Oh well, isn't this nice? Someone donated $50 to the party fund." Then he went to his office and waited. So the engineering students had rigged the box with one of those inserts from cards that play music when you open them. By popular vote, they had picked Let It Go from the Disney movie Frozen, right around the time the song was beginning to become unpopular. They also managed to ensure that once opened, the box couldn't close unless you pressed a hidden side button releasing the hinge, so the song would continue to play. For extra funsies, they made sure to angle the insert for maximum volume and secured it down with industrial strength glue. Sure enough, everyone in the office heard Idina Menzel belting the hated song and Brad's frustrated grunts while trying to close the box. One of those attracted by the sound was Brad's uncle. Finally, Brad chucked the box at the wall, managing to put a good-sized dent in it. The uncle then summoned Brad to his office. 15 minutes later, Brad left with a cardboard box and a cleared-out desk, along with a note in his file: "Do not rehire, do not recommend." So his engineering career was over. That Christmas, Uncle Dale had a little video prepared to show at the party. The doorbell camera had caught Brad's attempt to steal from the box, all to the tune of Let It Go. Proof that revenge is a dish best served frozen. Shut up!